But let's move on to Galcian. How can you play Galcian and not be predictable? I suppose is the best way of putting it. Probably the biggest problem with Galcian is their how to put it. Their tech tree branches into two paths. There's a fork in the road. After you get your sand skimmers, you need to consider whether you're going into railgun tech or if you're going into assault ship tech. Whichever one you do, the moment you build one, the moment you have an assault ship on the field, the moment you have a railgun or heavy or assault rail on the field, your enemy knows you have invested in that tech. You are stuck there. They see railguns, they say, I don't need to worry about air for the next 5-10 minutes. I don't need to worry about siege for the next 5-10 minutes. So, as weird as it may seem, the best thing you can do to remain unpredictable as Galcian is to be heavily invested in skimmers and try and hold off on revealing that tech as long as possible. You just don't have that luxury, though. And I mean, all of this plays into the biggest problems with Galcian at the moment. Is you can't rely on skimmers to win the early game unless you're in a mirror match. Hell, if you're Galcian versus Knef, you can't afford to stay on skimmers because if blast drones are hitting you, those skimmers are going to suffer. They don't have the range to cope with blast drones like Coalition and Soban do. So it is incredibly difficult. In the early game, you are forced to make that one or the other decision, quite frankly. The only way you can be unpredictable with it is if you can find ways of getting out a railgun rush as quickly as possible. So they're not scouting you for skimmers. They're seeing you suddenly moving across the map with an effective railgun force. I just don't see LAV the current meta with LAVs and Strikecraft allowing that is the problem. The only things that have ever been able to surprise myself is when someone has gone literally around the very edge of the map with a single production cruiser, and then they have been popping out, say, assault ships as they reach my economy. And that's because I failed to scout, not because they played incredibly. It would be a failing. You're relying on your opponent making a mistake, and therein lies the problem. But what can you do to mix it up in the mid game? Well, I mean, for instance, you could go into rail tech. You use those rails to, so let's say, primarily assault rails, to hold back the AAV and the LAV aggression. Now, because the assault rails are relatively inexpensive, they're not very heavy on RU cost. I can see there being the possibility you could then shift into air and surprise your opponent with interceptors. But it's just never going to be cost effective. The tech cost is too much. And really the power of Galcian, and to a lesser extent is Knef, is the abilities you can unlock for those units. What if they're diving on you with their LAVs and you've gotten the shunt maneuver? So you end up moving at far higher pace than they expect. They can't get in range and they suffer massive losses trying to get on top of those assault rails. Again, to some extent, it's the same thing with the heavy rails. If you are able to get those heavy rails out in the field, you're able to get range calibration going. You can have incredible impact with those abilities. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was my point, Majir. Sneaking into your opponent's base with AAVs or assault ships isn't, playing incredibly. It's just it wasn't scouted. So it's more reliant on your opponent not doing their job properly than it is on you being a good player. But it is still something that someone should keep in their deck of moves. So, the other thing to keep in mind, we're going into the tournament format we're going into is Swiss. That means you are going to get to play everyone. And a lot of the time I find people see that they're up against myself, or they're up against A Game, or they're up against whoever. And there's one of two mentalities that pops up. Either, well, I've already lost, so it doesn't matter, or they get really stressed out over it. Like, what do I have to do? How can I win? At the end of the day, I mean, you're still playing against another human being with the same problems you do. They've still got a micro and macro everything. And there is also the fact that because you're a lesser player, they may underestimate you. So if you're actually going to pull out something super aggressive, if you're going to pull out your ace in the hole, that's the game to do it in. As a matter of fact, in a Swiss game, you can quite frankly pull out that move in every single match because there's not a set of games to play. So if you have one trick, which your opponent's only going to get one chance to see, you could technically do it every game. Just saying. You could BD rush every game, and for each of your opponents, it's a new way that you've played. So, maybe it's less about you playing perfectly and more playing outside of the expectations of your opponent. So, maybe. That's more mind games, and that's where the high level strength of Deserts of Carrick comes from. When you can really pressure your opponent into believing or expecting certain things from you, and then playing that against them. I have definitely done games where I have convinced people I am going to be hyper aggressive every game. They then play defensively, and I then do a macro start, and I'm completely safe to be greedy. So fundamentally, you need to be aggressive. Even if you're not going out to attack your opponent's economy, having an LAV parked as close to their economy as possible is incredibly useful. So, yeah. Always scout is probably the crucial one. And if possible, get into the habit of like monitoring your trades. How many units are you losing versus them? The moment you've gotten into a fight and they've lost, say, 4 LAVs and you've lost 1, push your advantage. Just do it. Punch him in the face. Oh, man, this makes me sad. I remember this. So, for a brief moment, I thought I was playing against Galcian. Don't know why. So I saw Siege Cruiser and thought, haha! And then I realised here and, yeah. It's a shame. Dove in too shallow. If I'd cut across there, I don't think I would have lost any of these. But, oh well. What can I do? Be salty. Like I always am. So what would be another good piece of advice considering it's a Swiss? Just because you're at the bottom of the table, let's say you've lost every match so far and you've only got one game to play, it's still worth fighting for a single win. Just for the sake of being able to say, well, I still gave him a bloody nose. Because it's a tournament, it's most likely to actually see replays cast. And there's one thing that is worse than having lost every single game, and that is that people watch you and they think, he didn't even try. Like, he wasn't even, putting in the effort. You want to try and give everyone you fight a bloody nose. You want them to feel like if they didn't play as well as they did, you would have taken the game from them. You want to give them at least one moment in that game where they're like, oh man, if I'd screwed that up, he would have beat me. There's no big prize at the end of this tournament. There's no big prize for, coming along and participating. It is about, the honour of it. They're just feel. I played competitive Deserts of Karak. I enjoyed it. I managed to, fight Tren and, I almost killed it. You guys think I would have kept going back and fighting A-Game and Discara? Like, my win rate versus A-Game is appalling. I have won so few of the games I've fought against A-Game. It's not much better against Discara, to be fair, but, I definitely feel like I've managed to take more games off Discara than I have off A-Game. You just got to do it. Like, why not? Enjoy the damn game. Push yourself. That can be so deceptive. See, look at it from this perspective. It is so hard to tell there is actually a trench running along there. So you actually go down into an even deeper dip before you go up onto this flat piece, and then there's a little hill here. But the best place to be is actually up here. Oh, as far as coping with that, I know I go through this every goddamn time. But you hit. I can't do it. It's such a shame. I can't get the move reticle up. But essentially, if you press V or click this move order button, you can get a area around here. And you can basically get detailed topography. How high is all the terrain? Where are all the dips? It even shows how high and low from your current location the high ground bonus would apply. So if you get time, definitely use it. Makes your life a lot easier. It's much easier to read the terrain that way. Just do it. It will make your life easier. Ooh, that's actually pretty disgusting. The first missile that came in actually got 3 LAV kills. Ugh. Yeah. Anyway. Now, where were we? And the fight goes on. So the 2 remaining questions that I was given is as far as handling pop cap and unit upgrades versus carrier power. So we'll start with the pop cap because it's a relatively simple one. Pop cap for Coalition is basically a non-issue outside of protecting your logistics modules. As long as you are pretty smart about their placement, you're not allowing your enemy to pick them off. You can put down a logistics module for 250 CUs whenever you like, anywhere near your carrier. And you immediately get the 15 pop for it. Obviously, that being the case, if you're playing Coalition, you want to push your pop cap to the very edge and then throw out a logistics module when you need it. There is no reason not to do that. There's no need for you to sit there with access to 125 pop. Because you can have that pop whenever you want. That's less the case for Soban, because the Soban ALMs have a 5-second cooldown on them, which, when you are in that desperate situation that I need more pop, I need to be able to put out more units now, can be very awkward. But it simply means planning it a little bit more. Trying to make sure you're regularly putting out an ALM to keep your pop cap in line with your needs. And at the same time, it's providing you with defense. And due to that change, you can't have that defense reactively as much anymore. You can put down 1, but you can't put down the Soban fence like you could. Where it's really impactful, however, is with the Knef and the Gaussian, because they actually have to sit and run a tech. They have to sit there and close but no cigar, and that support cruiser goes down. This means you actually have to plan your upgrades. If Gaussian or Knef get pressured, they forget about running their pop upgrades. They get in a position where for, I believe, the next 30 seconds, something quite obnoxious like that. So I know that the first one is only like 10 seconds, but they ramp up as they go. So it's very easy for Gaussian or Knef to get in a situation where they need pop upgrades, but they've got to wait on it. So again, further, if you're pressuring Gaussian and Knef and they don't seem to be building units, it could be that they're at their pop cap. They're having to wait on research. So again, another opportunity to push the advantage. How close is... he's nowhere near dead. He looks it, but he's got plenty of health. In fact, what is he running currently? Yeah, 100 armor, not surprised. Yep, those railguns have their upgrades. They can't be doing any more damage. So, frankly put, I don't feel like PopCap is such an issue for Coalition. Unless they get into a position where they're losing those logistic modules, or they've been pushed off their spawn and they're being backstabbed. It's not much of an issue. Where it becomes a problem then is it's suddenly having that economy cost, having to spend 250 CU per... Ooh, that's going to be nasty. Or not. That was a very poor nuke, although it did relieve the carrier of the railgun pressure, so... So, for Coalition, and to some extent Soban, the pop problem is more of a... I'm losing and I need CUs to be able to afford more pop. For Gaussian and Knef, it is more a case of proper planning. Making sure they have enough pop for their needs. But if you're pressured, you can be left very vulnerable, which is, again, an ongoing issue with Soban and... what am I saying? Soban, Knef and Gaussian. Time and again, I mean, that's really the issue. Also, those LAVs are getting absolutely wrecked. Jeez. Oh well. Soban railguns showing no mercy. But neither is that siege cruiser. But yeah, moving on to the other question of unit upgrades versus carrier power. Really, at the start of a match, you're always going to be focused on unit upgrades. Although that should be after you have units to take advantage of them, not before. It is very easy early on to overinvest in unit upgrades without having the units to take advantage of them. Carrier power is a very different beast. Carrier power is probably the most valuable upgrade. You think like this whole offensive here, this set of skimmers, is being chewed up because there's power in this carrier, which is upgrading the effectiveness of these ALMs. Makes this whole backstab, which without the ALMs there could have done so much damage. Admittedly, it was followed up with a Coalition cruise missile, but you think about the cost on those skimmers and how little they effectively did, all because there is investment in carrier power. So I suppose the best way of looking at it is focus on map presence initially. You then use unit upgrades as a counter. So you get unit armor because you need to cope with the number of rapid fire, low damage LAVs or skimmers on the field. You get your damage upgrade on your railguns because you need to win the rail war. But there's no point in getting upgraded rails if you're running one or two of them, and actually most of your army is AAVs or LAVs. Carrier power is more of a mid-late game thing, which you want to be investing in at the start of the mid-game. You want to say to yourself, I actually have most of my forces out, I have a pretty strong presence and I want to empower my carrier. Or it could be a case that you've invested massively into a CU army, you've had LAVs duking it out, you've not traded well. So you start investing in that carrier because it is primarily an RU investment. Um, is there ever a time you shouldn't invest in your carrier? No. Is there a point of diminishing returns on carriers? Yes. Um, so, put simply, a coalition carrier, the more power it has, the better it is. There is no point where not having more power in a coalition carrier is bad, because you just reach the point where you can just have everything powered, and everything on a coalition carrier is very good. The same is true with the Galcian carrier. The more power it has, the better it is. Also, did that carrier just drift? Okay. Hmm? Maybe it was a trick of the eyes. But yeah, in both cases, they have a lot of potency in all of the systems available to them, and being able to go faster and have longer range guns and do more damage off those guns is good. Their big spike in effectiveness is carrier power level 5, and I would always recommend that you get to power level 5 on the Coalition and Galcian carrier outright, without question. As far as Knef and Soban are concerned, it's a bit different. I feel like the Soban carrier is basically entirely about its support functionality. So that is its ALMs, that is its microwave emitter. Both are very potent support tools. And in the case of both those, also very good harassing tools. Meanwhile, with the Knef carrier, really, it is about getting power level 5, and that is so that you have access to the carrier missile level 5 and to the mobility system level 5. Just so you're aware, as far as the Knef, that's going to be nasty. The Knef mobility level 5, that doubles the buff range from 500 meters, I think it is meters, to 1000. And it also means that you're giving, what is it, the plus 20 speed to not only your own units but all your allies. So yeah, that means you could buff a coalition carrier up to 80 speed. People don't use it because they're not generally that organized in a team game, but if you can pull it off, it's disgusting. And on that note, I really do need to test how effective the mobility buff is on battle cruisers, because that could be some interesting 2v2 dynamic. But yeah, to answer the question in the simplest way possible, I would say that unit upgrades are more of a tool for countering what you're dealing with, to improve the matchup for you, while carrier power is more about building that win option, with the best one being the Coalition, because the Coalition carrier just is amazing. Has the best nuke, has just incredible versatility, it can repair itself with level 5 in armor. 100 armor is amazing. You get the idea. The Galcian carrier, the only weakness of the Galcian carrier is its nuke is incredibly mediocre. That's it. Otherwise it's great. So yeah. Unit upgrades to counter, carriers to win. It's all good. Except for Soban. Then it's about harassment, killing your opponent's economy with microwave emitters. By the way, the microwave emitter has the shortest cooldown. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure we can check that. Whereas the other nukes are 120 seconds. The microwave emitter is every 90 seconds. That is 500 CUs, so make sure you're actually going to hit their economy. So, yeah. Now, let's see. Is there anything I have forgotten? Also, yeah, the Galcian economy. What am I saying? Economy. The Galcian upgrades are incredibly important and extremely potent. Range calibration is probably one of the best unit upgrades, and probably almost directly behind that is the Interceptor Afterburner upgrade, which is ludicrous, as you can tell by how fast these are. For those of you who are unaware, oh come on, 696 speed. Catch that. And it would appear this replay is over. But yeah,